Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And thank you, Race Hobbs, my esteemed producer. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth, and whether you are listening live on a Monday night or way in the future as a podcast, it's a pleasure to be back, especially with today's guest. Dr. Susan Shumsky is Doctor of Divinity and has dedicated her life to helping people take command of their lives in highly effective, powerful, positive ways. She is the author of 20 books published by the likes of Simon Schuster, Random House, Red Wheel, Weiser, and Hampton Roads Press. Susan has won 46 prestigious book awards. A pioneer in the human potential field, she has taught thousands of people meditation, prayer, affirmation, and intuition. Her books have been published in 40 foreign editions, and several were #1 Amazon.com bestsellers. They include Divine Revelation, Miracle Prayer, Ascension, Exploring Meditation, Instant Healing, The Power of Auras, Awaken Your Third Eye, Christen Your Divine Intuition, Color Your Chakras, Big Book of Chakras and Chakra Healing, Third Eye Meditations, Earth Energy Meditations, Prosperity Meditations, The Inner Light, How India Influenced the Beatles, and her 13-time award-winning first place Ben Franklin Book Award memoir, Maharishi Me. Susan is a highly respected spiritual teacher and founder of Divine Revelation, a unique field-proven technology for contacting the divine presence, hearing and testing the inner voice, and receiving clear divine guidance. For 2 decades, her mentor was Maharishi Me, Guru of the Beatles. Susan served on the Maharishi's personal staff for 6 years. A sought-after media guest and highly acclaimed professional speaker, Susan has presented over 700 live speaking engagements and over 1,300 media appearances, including Women's World, GQ, Cosmopolitan, Los Angeles Times, Sunday Express of London, Washington Post, nationally syndicated and network TV, Alan Combs, love the guy, on Fox News, Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, and William Shatner's Weird or What. Susan is featured in the documentary films 3 Magic Words, The Illumined Ones, Superpower, The Maharishi Archives, and has a primary role in the film The Beatles in India. Her websites are drsusan.org, divinetravels.com. And Dr. Susan Shumsky, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
I'm really excited to be speaking with you today, Peter.
Well, all I can say to start with is I wish I could be on the conference, on that cruise that you are putting together for September. And it will be our main subject of this conversation. But Susan, I'd like to give myself, as well as my viewers and listeners, an idea of how you became the person you are. And let's begin. At the beginning, may I ask where you were born?
I was born in Denver. I'm a cowgirl.
Yahoo! Can you tell us a little bit about your family and your early life?
Sure. My father was a surgeon. My mom was a bookkeeper. And I grew up in a Jewish family, and very conventional, very far away from woo-wooville, which I later joined woo-wooville when I became a hippie back in the 60s. And I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area. And those of us who were hippie flower children, we were seeking nirvana. We were seeking higher consciousness.
Yeah.
At that time, our gurus were Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert,
Yep.
who later became Ram Dass.
Yes.
And they told us we need to turn on, tune in, and drop out. So that's what I was trying to do as a hippie. And they said we could reach nirvana through LSD. That didn't work out too well for me. In fact,
that actually worked out fairly well for me early on, when in that halcyon time before it was made illegal and there was no associated social paranoia or what have you. I remember picking up that copy of Be Here Now,
right.
Ram Dass's book, in print continuously since then, and it still offers some very good guidance to the soul, so to say, and as a way of living your life. One thing I'm curious about is one of my early revelations in coming of age in the 60s was, it seems so profound at the moment, but it's rather simple, that a out-of-body or a psychedelic or an induced experience is like a journey. It's, the euphemism, of course, was a trip. And you are a passionate traveler. You have built your work and your world around not just elevating consciousness and assisting people, but in actual travel. And I'm wondering which bug bit you first. Was it the spiritual quest, or did you have an opportunity as a kid to go on a trip and it kind of turned on that thing of, I want to see the world?
No, I was seeking spiritual journey, spiritual experience. But at age 22, I did go to India, and I went to be with Maharishi Me, who later became the guru of the Beatles. So I studied with him, and I actually was on his personal staff for 6 years, and most of that was in Europe. So I lived in Europe for 6 years, and that was during my early 20s, So, yeah, I mean, really the spiritual seeking took me to the travels. And then I spent a lot of my life traveling, really.
You beat me by 2 years. I roamed around India 4 months at the age of 24. Time in Nepal as well.
Wow.
And I, pack on the back, not looking for enlightenment as much as wanting to have a better sense of the world that I was living in, and pushing myself, I guess, in many ways, to take risks that I never would again, and I hadn't before. Some of them quite rational, other ones fabulously reckless, but somehow that bell jar of safety, it kept me from extinguishing my light in the process. Let's talk a bit about Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He, I think even for young people now, they know who he is. But for us coming of age, he kind of exploded on the scene once his association with the Beatles became a reality, bringing millions of people who were interested in TM, whether or not they took the course or followed it as a life guide, but awakening that sensibility and that curiosity in so many young Western kids.
Exactly.
How did you first
became very famous?
It's one thing to follow a figure like that. It's another thing to make your way to them, to meet them, and to establish the fact that you are not only competent, but your intentions are that high that you want that position. How did you end up working for the Maharishi?
I asked him. I simply asked him. It was that simple.
There's a life lesson for us.
Exactly. Yeah. I was bold enough to just ask him, can I join your international staff?
Wow. Not to name drop, but your work has taken you into proximity of well-known people who have followed that path. Can you tell us about some of the people that you've interfaced with over the years?
Yes. I did run into Donovan. He came to the Transcendental Meditation Center, and he came to get his meditation checked, actually, because I was a meditation checker at a very young age. So he came to the center, and I checked his meditation just like anyone else. And then I asked him, are you enjoying your time here in Berkeley? And what brings you here? And he said, none of your business. And then he ran out the door. So that was my encounter with Donovan. But a lot of really famous people came to Europe to study with Maharishi, including Mike Love. He was there a lot of the time. Mike Love is the lead singer of the Beach Boys. And obviously we had Prudence Farrow. Mia Farrow's sister was very, very into transcendental meditation. And wow, there were just a lot of celebrities. Richard Chamberlain. I don't know. It's a long list
No
of
doubt.
celebrities that came and went. So, yeah. Doug Henning was a very famous magician. He got really involved with TM. There were just a lot of them.
Did you interface at all with David Lynch?
No, he was later. Okay. He became a TM meditator much later.
Okay.
So.
At what point did you decide to branch out, so to say, and to write your first book?
Yes. Well, what happened was I left Transcendental Meditation Organization in 1989 is when I really formally left. I left Fairfield, Iowa, which was Maharishi's university. And at that time, I had found another form of meditation that I liked better than transcendental meditation. So I was practicing this other technique. And so because of that, I started to travel around and teach that. I was very, very into it. So I wanted to teach it. I always like to share things when I learn something. I want everyone else to learn about them too. So I was traveling around and teaching. And then I realized that if anyone was going to take me seriously, I was going to have to write a book. So I wrote a book. I wrote my first book, which is called Divine Revelation. And amazingly, it was published by Simon & Schuster. Whoa. By miraculous means, it was published by Simon & Schuster. So that was my very first forage into publishing. And I started at the top.
You sure did. I think 20 published books entitles you to be taken very seriously. And ironically, when I think of the public face of Maharishi, seriousness was not what was usually observed. He had a very light heart in many ways, and that childlike aspect that hopefully never dies in us as we age. Do you remember the first time that work that you were doing or assistance that you were providing made a huge life-changing difference in the life of an individual, reinforcing for you that you're doing something right here.
Well, really, uh, what reinforced me that I was doing something right was my own personal experience and transformation,
Got it.
and which was profound. I mean, I had profound changes, first of all, by learning transcendental meditation, because I had LSD had created in me, unfortunately, psychotic episodes, and it was extremely devastating for me. But once I learned transcendental meditation, I was cured very, very quickly. Even though, the psychiatrist told me that I was crazy and that I was psychotic, just a very short time of regular meditation healed me very, very quickly. And then after I learned this other method, which I liked even better, after I'd practiced TM for 2 decades, and then I learned this other method, which was incredibly transformative again. That was something that was a huge difference in my life, because transcendental meditation generally is a kind of in a way, a mechanical technique that takes you to a state of inner peace. But it doesn't, and I had fantastic experiences, by the way, with TM, nothing but the best, wonderful experiences with TM. Okay. But what I found with this other method was that there had been something missing in my spiritual experience. And what was missing was divine love. Divine love. And divine love was the most important thing for me, kind of a bhakti kind of experience, meaning devotion to God, devotional experience.
Susan, meditation, TM, they're subjects that have deeply entered the popular culture, as well as signifying different things for different people who have never been involved. I think a lot of people just, they hear, oh, you have a mantra, your own word or sound, and you repeat that to yourself and you sit there and you achieve nirvana. It's not quite that simple, but for people that have never meditated or really have never gotten a simple definition of what is involved without, can you simply state for folks what it's about, basically how it works to a degree, and the benefits therefore to be gotten from meditating regularly?
Well, there have been a lot of scientific studies on meditation. Actually, Maharishi was very innovative in the sense that he actually decided to do scientific studies and scientific research on meditation, which hadn't really been done before he was on the scene. And so meditation has so many benefits because of the fact that it calms you down. And stress is the cause of all kinds of diseases. Yeah. So it's really beneficial to spend some time, some quiet time, and become peaceful, become relaxed within. And there's a lot of different methods of meditation. There's so many ways to meditate. I personally, at this point in my life, I believe that the easiest way, especially for beginners, is to do what's called guided meditation, where you're guided step by step through the process. And guided meditation is something that's in all my books. There are guided meditations specifically in many of my books. And that is a very simple step by step. You just, it's like the do nothing. I call it the do nothing program. Do nothing, nothing, and less than nothing. You just follow the instructions step by step. It takes you step by step into deep meditation. So, meditation is extremely beneficial. And it's just a state of inner peace, inner peacefulness.
Yeah. And I love that when you say guided meditation, this is not something that needs another person. You guide yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guide yourself into meditation, or you can listen to the audio books that I have.
Sure.
For example, Earth Energy Meditations, Third Eye Meditations, Prosperity Meditations. These are all books that are just consist of guided meditations. Also, Instant Healing, which is my most popular book. That is filled with a lot of guided meditations as well, either guided meditations, affirmations, or prayers.
Wow. Instant healing, for most of us, it sounds like an oxymoron. Nobody heals instantly. We have too much attachment to our pain. Many of us see ourselves in terms of our pain. Who would we be without all of our crap that we drag along? But of course, this is not a reality necessarily. With respect to what is broken or what needs healing, can you give us an idea of how this technique works at the speed that it does?
Well, yeah, instant healing just means that there's an instant transformation when you use some of the methods that I teach, mostly affirmative prayers or affirmations. That some of these are so powerful. Actually, I shouldn't say some. All of them are so powerful that there's an instant transformation. Now, for example, if you have a disease, obviously you're not going to just instantly, now I don't no longer have that disease. But what you have is an instant transformation of your mind. And okay, so Buddha once said, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. That's a stunning statement. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. And he goes on to say, if a person speaks or thinks a positive thought, then happiness follows him or her. If a person speaks or thinks a negative thought, then unhappiness follows him or her. And what he's saying is that we are creating our own destiny through thought, through our thoughts, actually through three things: our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. So we create our own destiny. And if we speak a statement that's positive, that will have an instant positive result. And we can feel it. We feel it instantly. We are lifted. We feel better right away. So that's the idea of the book Instant Healing, is to use these little formulas, just affirmations, prayers, mantras, just some things that will change us instantly.
Susan, coming out of your initial involvement in TM and then publishing a book, moving on to the meditation form that you prefer, you started to enter a wider world of non-standard human interests, behavior, involvements, and I'm imagining at some point it brought you into the world of people who are psychic, who have developed aspects of, nonverbal communication. And at a certain point, I expect people who alleged that they had and continue to have contact experiences with non-human beings. Many of them feel they're extraterrestrial in nature. And then ultimately, those people, and certainly a number of them will be on your cruise in the audience and in the speaker roster, who have been taken, who have been taken by these beings and returned after whatever happens. Do you remember when that awareness or those people started to come into your world, and your first thoughts about somebody who alleged that they could move things with their mind or had been aboard a unidentified flying object?
Well, I'm not a skeptic. So when people tell me their experiences, I believe them. And many people have had amazing experiences. And so there's much more to heaven and earth than is dreamt of in our philosophy. So
Yes.
We certainly live in a miraculous universe, and that universe is not confined to this physicality, to this, this thing that, that we live in, the physical world. There's many subtle realms of existence. There are many worlds. There are many multitudes of light, beauteous universes, and many of them we can experience within ourselves. Yeah. So I believe people when they talk about their experiences. I believe that people have had unusual encounters with other dimensional beings. They might even be physical beings, or they might be spiritual beings. But yeah, I believe in all that because I've experienced so much of it myself.
Yeah. Have you ever had your own UFO sighting? No.
And the reason I have not, well, I should not say no, because on our cruises, we do have the UFO watch, nightly watch. So yes, I have seen UFO in the UFO watches. I have, but I haven't had any personal experiences of the third kind, anything like that. And but I've had thousands of experiences with divine beings, beings of light, beings on higher dimensional levels.
Do you remember the first time you had that experience?
Well, I remember the first time I had an amazing meditation experience, and that was when I was a hippie back in the 60s. And I was reading all of these spiritual books because I wanted to reach nirvana. So I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. I was reading Buddhist scriptures. I was reading The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. And in Alan Watts' books, he said that you have to find a meditation guide. Well, in 1966 in Berkeley, California, you didn't exactly go to the yellow pages and find meditation guide or anything remotely similar to that. So, but I asked a friend, I said, how do I find this meditation guide? And he said, well, have you ever tried to meditate on your own? I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I lay down on my bed and sort of prayed for or asked for a meditation. And immediately I was propelled into this ecstatic state. I could feel a cord of energy, or it felt like I was plugged into a cosmic electric socket, but in the most ecstatic way. This rush of energy was rushing from the tips of my toes all the way up to the top of my head. And this ecstatic feeling came over me. And I figured, well, I guess this is meditation. I didn't know any better. Little did I know that not only had I had my first meditation experience, but also my first Kundalini experience. And without any drugs, I hadn't taken any drugs or stimulants or anything. I just asked for meditation, There it was. So my philosophy is one thing. My main philosophy is ask and it shall be given unto you. Ask and you will receive.
And you find overwhelmingly that is true.
It is. It's totally true. You asked me before how I, How did I get onto Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's staff? I just asked him. The trouble is people don't ask. They're too passive. They sit down and they just think that if they sit there, that something's going to happen. Nothing will happen unless you ask for it. Ask for it. Call upon a divine being by name. Say, Jesus, come, or whoever you want to call upon. Lord Buddha, please come. Please take me into a state of higher consciousness. Call upon the being, a divine being that you believe in, and ask for it. The reason I never had a UFO experience, as far as encounter of the third kind or anything like that, is because I never asked for it. I never really wanted it. So I'm too busy talking to the divine beings that I love.
And earthlings in general.
And earthlings too, yeah.
At a certain point, you started to speak and make presentations, but somewhere along the line, you decided to organize your own event. Was the first conference that you organized on land or at sea?
I was doing retreats for many, many years, for decades actually. And then somehow Spirit guided me to do a tour to India for the Kumbh Mela, which is this huge, huge event. 100 million people attended over a 6-week period. It's all the holy people from India come and they set up tents and you can go and visit them in their tents. And so I was led to do a tour to India for Kumbh Mela. And that turned out really, really well. It was awesome. And so I did that for several times, for several different years. In fact, I'm going to do one upcoming in January.
Oh, how wonderful.
I'm going to do a tour to Kumbh Mela again. I didn't do it during the entire pandemic period, obviously. Sure. So yeah, I started with that. And then, meanwhile, I was going on cruises with my sister. She and I would go cruising. And I got this thought in my mind. Well, you're doing tours to India, you're doing tours to Peru, you're doing tours to Bali, to Assisi, to a lot of, I arranged tours to a lot of different places. But then I thought, well, why don't I just do a conference on a cruise ship? So in 2011 was my first conference on a cruise ship, and very successful, great. Since then, never looked back. I've been doing conferences on cruise ships. It's really fun.
Oh, wonderful. What I've only done one, and it was last year. A small company on the East Coast, and it was the ship was the largest, newest in the Norwegian cruise line. I forget its name, but it was an otherworldly experience for me. I had never been on a cruise. I did work my way across the ocean at 24 as a deckhand on a freighter, but that doesn't count. The whole idea of that image that comes to people's mind of a cruise and the great food and meeting different people and, just the wonder of these big ships and going to different places. The idea that you have kind of two parallel tracks running on a conference like this. You have an extraordinary concentration of very knowledgeable presenters in their own areas of study, and the luxury to be able to spend extended periods of time together, which is not always the case at a land-based UFO conference. But what I guess one of the things that intrigues me most is while you are feeding your head and learning more and more or listening to the presentations, making contact with some of the presenters, you are traveling. And in the case of this tour, absolutely historic designated side trips, which for me, somebody who is fascinated by history in general, I know that's kind of a broad statement, architecture, native cultures, art. Every one of the stops that you'll be making is its own event. And for, I guess, really what it comes down to is if that idea of traveling in your experiences and traveling in real life, connecting with people. And quite a number of the people that go on these cruises, they go on to become friendly acquaintances or real friends, and they will return. It's a very special thing in their lives. I'm not sure whether we should start, as far as Contact at Sea goes, with some of the discussing some of the extraordinary speakers you have, or some of the stops that you will be making and the side trips that are available. Where would you like to begin?
Well, yeah, we could begin with, you talked about the side trips, which are really cool. So on this particular cruise, we are going to be going to Alaska, yes. So we are going to Sitka, Alaska first. That's the first stop on our cruise. And there we will be with some indigenous Tlingit people, which I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this particular shore excursion. I'm like jumping out of my skin. It's called Discover Sitka's Indigenous Culture, Totems, Raptors, and Dance. So we're going to have an indigenous guide who's going to take us to the totem park, and we'll walk through the totem park, and he'll tell us all the stories of the different totem poles we're going to see. And then we're going to go to a raptor center, and that will be another amazing experience of these various bald eagles and other creatures. Alaska has more bald eagles than any other place in the world, by the way. And then we're going to go to the clan house, and we're going to experience the indigenous dance performance. That's the one that I'm really excited about. It's called the Na'a Kahidi dance performance. So this is a very special experience in Sitka, which, I mean, I've been to Alaska several times, but I've never been able to manage to do something with the indigenous people, with this kind of experience with indigenous people. So I'm so excited. And then we're also going to go in Skagway to this amazing trip up the mountains to the Yukon territory. Not the Yukon territory, but the Yukon Trail that goes up to where the gold rush was.
Yes.
And it's the Klondike Gold Rush. So not only are we going to go up on the train, but we're going to stop at the top and have lunch and go to this amazing museum that's up there that has all this taxidermy of woolly mammoths and other things. And then we're going to take the bus back down. So we'll have scenery, one type of scenery on the way up, another on the way down. I'm so excited. Oh my God. And then the other exciting thing is we're doing the Mendenhall Glacier and Whale Watch.
Yeah.
And that's in Juneau. And the whales, there are guaranteed whales on this particular excursion. And how can they guarantee whales? Because they know where they feed. They know where the feeding spots are. In fact, they even know the whales. They even have names for some of the whales because they're there. They know, they recognize them. And then the other place we're going, in Victoria, BC, we're going to go on a ghost tour, on a paranormal visit to haunted Victoria. And I didn't know Victoria is apparently one of the most haunted places on the planet. So we're going to go on a ghostly walks tour. And we're also going to visit this incredible museum called Miniature World, which is the greatest little show on earth, with over 85 miniature dioramas and displays. So this is going to be so much fun. I just can't wait.
Well, as you've been speaking, I've been scrolling down, and one of the things that caught me when I first looked at the site some weeks ago was that photograph of that train ride up the mountain. It just made my jaw drop. Um, very different than the closest thing I can recall to it was absolutely the ultimate hair-raising bus ride from Ruxall, entry point into Nepal, to Kathmandu, where you're up 8,000-10,000 feet almost, and you're riding along that road that you occasionally see somewhere photographed, posted in Facebook, with 1,000-foot drop straight down
Right.
and 1 inch of road left, which I decided to fly out during a monsoon in a small plane and risk my life rather than take that bus back to the flatlands of India. And obviously did it. This is absolutely amazing. And by the way, I should say right now, and we'll give you these websites again, if you go to Divine Travels, and that's DIVINETRAVELS.com, it will bring up the entire website, and you can start to look at some of the features of this. This is completely separate from, for me, almost that science fiction feeling of being on I don't even know how to describe the size of these ships. My first thought was, this is too big. God didn't intend to make ships this big. There's a zillion people on here. It's some science fiction thing, a mothership. I just found it wondrous. And, you know, even the small area that I was able to explore, these things are, you know, I guess kind of the equivalent of a whale in mechanical terms. It's the largest moving object, I'm guessing, that human beings have ever created. And, you know, because we have the buoyancy of the sea, you can make them even bigger. At the same time, there's that untrusting part of me that says, this is very heavy. Heavy things sink in water. I know about all the displacement stuff, but well, the other thing also that's a legend for anybody that's never cruised, a legend in what you hope and anticipate, that often is the case, is you eat wonderfully. And the selections of food, I remember once getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning simply to watch the setup. I was so impressed by how beautifully it was run. And at breakfast, you have like 60 different choices of food, and it just all moves along very well. And then people reintegrate themselves back into the things that they're on, plus that that quirky socialization that goes on where, you know, complete strangers meet in an elevator, one of them in flip-flops and a t-shirt and a towel heading to the pool, the others in evening clothes going to the theater. And how over a period of days, everybody starts chatting with everybody else. You know, people who are obviously well-heeled and can afford these things with folks that you know have saved, and often coming together, a group of people from the same office, and every once in a while making special t-shirts. It's just so interesting and so much fun. As important as this conference is, and as I've watched your speaker roster grow, it's like, holy shit, this is a major layout of presenters. It doesn't matter whether it's moving or still. Plus, it's kind of divided into several distinct areas. The one I'm most familiar with, and where I have some dear colleagues and friends that will be sailing with you, is the UFO area of study. But then there's the spiritual, the paranormal, the theological, and experiential in terms of, my gosh, some of your presenters talking about their extraordinary experiences, and everybody is seasoned presenter. There's no newbies here. These are people that are professionals. And I noticed, for example, when I looked at the speakers in the workshops, Geraldine Orzoko, who I had met and spent time with several years ago at a a conference in Nevada, who has had extraordinary experiences in terms of interfacing with extraterrestrial beings and being a mother. This is something that may sound absolutely wild if you've not studied the serious literature and the scientific material to back it up. But Geraldine is one of the most eloquent spokespeople I've ever heard for people living that life. Some of these folks are truly celebrity level in terms of our fields of interest. You have my boss, Margie Kay, who is the head honcho here at KUNX Digital Broadcasting. I'm delighted to see her there as well. My old buddy, Jimmy Church, one of the best known and most popular broadcasters in the paranormal world anywhere. One of my soul brothers, Stephen Bassett, Daniel Sheehan, Grant Cameron, Daryl Sims. It's an extraordinary lineup, and I've been educating myself on some of the folks that I'm not as familiar with. Can you tell us for yourself some of the speakers that you're most interested in hearing, or what we can expect to hear? And remember, these are not just presentations, folks. These are workshops. The amount of availability that you will have to so much information by so many world-class presenters is about as good as it gets.
For sure. For example, we have Seth Shostak, who is the lead astronomer for SETI. I'm just so excited that he's going to be there. Oh my gosh. I've never seen him before. I've never heard him speak before, but I am very excited about having him on the ship. And then, of course, Stephen Bassett, who is just a legendary researcher and legendary advocate for disclosure. That's very right. Political, you know. Yes. And Grant Cameron, the recipient of the Leeds Conference Researcher of the Year and UFO Congress Researcher of the Year. Yeah. He's been researching since 1975. He is a very charismatic speaker. Wonderful personality.
I will jump in for a moment and tell you, when Graham and I first met and became friends, we joked about him a bit, always in a very affectionate and respectful way, because he had made it his business to become the most knowledgeable investigative writer in the world on UFOs and the United States presidency. The reason that it had an irony that was humorous to us is Grant is Canadian, but he owned the subject for years. And I guess this goes back maybe 10 years ago or so. We both happened to be speaking at a same conference, and I noticed that the title of his talk was completely having nothing to do with the presidency and UFOs, which up until that point, to the best of my knowledge, was the only thing he spoke about. And it was essentially somebody getting up there and saying, some things have changed for me and changed for me dramatically. I have this history of doing that work in this very specific area of research, but I am now much more involved and want to focus on UFOs and consciousness, at which point he took off like a rocket. I don't know of any speaker, and there are those of us that can go for prolonged periods of time without water. And just, reborn members of the Politburo who can speak for 5 hours if nobody stops us. Grant is one of the greatest stream of consciousness speakers I have ever met in my life. He has a mind that is sharp as a tack. He connects everything as he goes, and his enthusiasm is for the subjects that he's communicating. It's like a motor, and it's just a drive mechanism that, he's like a force in nature. He really is a remarkable presenter like that. No joke. Again, there are those of us that pride ourselves on being good speakers, and Steve Bassett is also truly one of the best. We haven't even gotten to Daniel Sheehan, who's, if you Google Daniel Sheehan biography, your jaw will drop. I mean, this man has been involved in so many important events and with so many world-class people who have changed the world to one degree or another, including presidents of the United States, House Assassinations Committee. Um, he was John Mack's lawyer at Harvard when he was censured, first person since Timothy Leary, as we remember, and John re-entered with a glow, so to say. Daryl Sims, a unique researcher in the world of UFO studies, focusing on the implant phenomena, these, I was going to say human-made, but no, these these devices that are implanted in people's bodies by at least one group of these other intelligences. More of your women speakers, I'm unfamiliar with as presenters. I've read their bios and some of the workshops, and we're coming into the end of our first hour, but I want to pick up with them. I'm guessing, from my experience, your speakers are as fired up as many of the people who are going to be the conferees, the people attending here, because for people like us, this is a grand adventure as well. And most of us, you know, we're workers. We're in the trenches. I don't have a lot of patience for prima donnas, even if they've earned it. We all are in this together. And at an event like this, it's just incredibly moving to see the connections that are made between people, many of whom have saved for a long time for this special event, or it's just another wonderful, you know, information cruise that they're going on. But to be the progenitor, to be the person that creates this experience for these people to experience, that's got to be a pretty special feeling.
I love it. You know what I love most about these cruises is you can hang out with these people. Yes. They're not just up on the stage far away with a spotlight on them. Yeah. You can go to the bar, you know, and hang out with them. You can sit with them at dinner. Yeah. You can have dinner with them. These luminaries, these amazing people that you've been watching or reading about for decades. Yeah. And there they are. You can hang out with them and have fun with them. You can go on a trip with them somewhere, you know, go on the train up the mountain. It's great.
One of the things that I observed on my cruise experience was, although we weren't contractually obligated to do so, literally all the speakers who could have gone off in the evenings and explored the ship or, you know, taken advantage of any number of wonderful options that are gratis to the presenters, they chose to hang out with the people that paid their money to be there for their talks. And why stop there? We would find each other in small groups chatting, or we'd make a plan for everybody to hang out together. Some wonderful storytelling sessions, which for me is one of the greatest spontaneous things that emerges from an event like this. And it can be the presenters or the people attending. I remember a couple that were, they were either from Tennessee or Kentucky. And they had us all absolutely enwrapped. The thing that got them involved in the subject, they had not thought much about UFOs, and it was a UFO-centric conference, was that they looked up one day from their farm property, and there was this honking thing that wasn't ours and hanging over, and they filmed it. And of course, that was on their phone, which was passed all around the circle as the couple told us not just what they saw, but the animal reactions in the background and their reflections since, and who they had connected with, and the analysis that had been done on the footage. That thing of seeing people exchanging addresses. And that brings us right to the end of our first hour. Peter Robbins here, my very special guest today, Dr. Susan Shumsky, and we will be back in 5 minutes. Stay with us.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Kathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us #1 on Paranormal Talk Radio.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UNX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
Hey, UFO conference enthusiasts, we've got another great event for you in 2024. The Saucers and Aliens Kansas UFO Day in Dimension G is being held in the UFO capital of Kansas, Geneseo, on July 6th. This is a fun festival in the middle of nowhere. There will be a parade, decorated yards, costumes, vendors, speakers, and a showing of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Appropriately, an 8-foot-tall statue of Gort and a statue of Klaatu will be dedicated. This will be the only museum in the U.S. with these custom-made statues. If you'd like to donate to the statue project or attend the event, visit GeneseoMuseum.com. That's GENESEO Museum.com. Be sure to bring your camera when you attend the event. That's GeneseoMuseum.com.
And we are back. The program is Meanwhile Here on Earth. I'm your host, Peter Robbins, and my special guest today is Dr. Susan Shumsky. And welcome back, Susan.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here talking to you today, Peter.
Me too, Susan. We've been back and forth for some time, and we have some commonalities. One thing I was thinking during the break, growing up in a Reformed Jewish family, being very proud to be Jewish, but not a religious person, certainly a strong spiritual aspect. I'm wondering if, looking back now, if there was anything in the Jewish teachings that you learned when you were young that either echo or have parallels in the way that you approach the world now. One of the things I, now looking back and understanding how much dogma, how many people grew up with, and much of it restricting, confounding, somewhat frightening. The basic message I got from my rabbi and from my teachings, when all was said and done, is God is love. Figure the rest out for yourself. And as a child in Sunday school, I remember thinking, growing up in an archdiocese county on Long Island, New York, and having a lot of Catholic school friends who went to St. Agnes, a parochial school, the conversations we used to have and all of the things that they told me about Jesus and the Holy Trinity and heaven and hell, it made my head spin. And, asking the rabbi directly, what do we think? What happens after we die? And Rabbi George B. Lieberman, God rest his good soul, a wonderful rabbi, Russian emigre, wonderful slight accent we used to poke affectionate fun at, would have made a great politician. His basic response, as I recall, was, Peter, what a wonderful question. Children, as you grow older, remember Peter's question. Ask questions, question everything around you. The world. And I'm sitting there thinking, as a 7 or 8 year old, I don't think he knows the answer. I don't think he knows what happens after we die. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, I realize now I am absolutely certain I still don't know the answer. And you know what? That's just fine. What will happen will happen. And I'm as curious as I was back then. But do you, things, of course, have been written out of and written into holy texts since time immemorial. It's a way to control people, to redefine behavior, to put the fear of God into people, or to create a warm, welcoming, a theology. I'm wondering if there were things early on in Judaism that were written out subtly because they were a little too far out, and that we are rediscovering them to some degree, and in other of the great religions that have been subject to editing, so to say. I am kind of going off on a tangent here, but does that ring any bells for you? Was there anything in Judaism that you felt yourself embracing from another angle or moving away from in following the path that you have?
Yes, I mean, I've been following a metaphysical spiritual path since mid 1960s. And why did I follow that path? Probably because of my upbringing in the spiritual Jewish tradition. I mean, I'm not a Hasidic Jew. I was raised as you were in the Reform, which is, is the least orthodox. So, but I always loved God, and I always loved the scriptures, and I always loved going back to original scriptures of every religion and seeing how similar they are to each other. I always was fascinated by the similarities of all world religions, and that they're all saying exactly the same thing. And many of the doctrines in Judaism are the same as the doctrines in Hinduism.
Yeah.
You find the same kinds of metaphysical viewpoint of the universe and how the creation and all of these things. So I love reading original scriptures. I love writing about that sort of thing. And it's always been a tremendous interest of mine. So I would say that being raised Jewish really has made me a more spiritual person. I don't think I would have come out to be so interested in spirituality if I hadn't gone to the if I wasn't sent to Saturday school. We had Saturday school. I know that's
Right.
different
Exactly.
than Christians. So, that's what we did. We went
Yeah.
on the Shabbat, on the Sabbath. And my family was somewhat observant. They weren't, my father was a surgeon. He was a scientist. He called himself an atheist. My mother called herself a agnostic, but that's probably true with a lot of Jewish people.
Yeah.
They're not, but I was always more on the mystical end, more interested in the experience of God, experience of divine bliss, the experience of the wholeness and oneness that underlies and gives rise to the universe, experience of expanded awareness, of unbounded awareness. And also very much interested in world peace.
Yeah.
And that's what attracted me to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, because his idea was he wanted to create world peace. That was his goal.
Yeah.
And he, even from the beginning in the 1950s, when he started teaching transcendental meditation, he said that if a certain percentage of the population would meditate, that we could have world peace. And that really resonated with me, because as a child of the Cold War and terrified of the atom bomb, we lived very close to an Air Force base. And so we would hear planes going over our heads really often. And every time I heard a plane going over my head as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old child, I'm afraid that the bomb is going to drop on us. So that, that kind of fear of annihilation makes a person a little bit philosophical.
Delicately phrased, yes.
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
I've been sitting here thinking, listening to you, and wanting to kind of ask you a question that sort of falls kind of between the cracks in all of what we're talking about. Your very first trip to India, you are under the auspices of the TM organization. You have a place to stay, you have a job, so to say. You're not like I was, with a pack on your back heading out into the hinterlands and just seeing what happens. But surely there was that first blast, that first time that you're in like a population center, whatever business that you're doing, where people like you and I, who grew up, I'll just say it, white middle-class American, and all of a sudden we are in the third world. Capital letters with red wines coming off of them. And we are seeing poverty at a level that was totally abstract to us up until that point. At a certain point, you may see your first non-living human being, because people live on the streets, they pass away, it happens in a public forum sometimes, or children who at the age of 5 or 6, you can see the weariness in their faces. For me, it was, I had heard the word karma and the wheel of life, but I grew up understanding that most of life is pretty good and having a good time and, making a difference in your world and connecting with people and loving, where for most of the world, you are hanging on. And the idea is not like my Western mindset of stay on that wheel for as long as you can. And, if reincarnation is a reality rather than an allegory, and I think there's a lot to that, to come back to continue your work, to continue learning, or to be of assistance, or to move on, or to learn the lessons you need to learn. What I'm saying, in essence, did that point come for you where you had that epiphany of, I can't believe how fortunate I've been in my life, how completely, I've seen pictures and television footage and documentaries, but I've never been touched to this depth by the fact that most people, if they follow, say, a Hindu philosophy or a Buddhist philosophy, it's about moving along on that wheel and ultimately getting off and moving on to whatever you choose for next. But the shock of seeing somebody who had had smallpox, their face looking like the craters of the moon, when you had never seen a smallpox victim in your entire life growing up in the United States of America. I know I'm going on a bit, but can you think out loud a bit about, this basic sensibility and how it might have touched you when you first were immersed in it?
I think travel opens your mind.
Sure does. It sure does.
When you go to foreign lands, you find out about other types of cultures, other types of people. You see other ways of living, and you're not just stuck in your little with the blinders on. So I think travel is something that definitely, it's different than just seeing it in the movies or hearing about it or seeing it on TV. To actually go to these different places and meet people that are indigenous to those places is a very enriching experience.
It is.
And that's how I felt about it. I didn't find that I was shocked or upset about poverty or, when I came back from India, it's like, oh, there's so much poverty. How did you stand going there? And it's like, okay, I didn't really experience it as a shock. I didn't experience it as something horrendous. I experienced it as different places, different people. And in fact, I found the people of India to be so much heart-based, so much love generated. There was so much love around me in India. It was very different than the Western kind of, shall we say, it was like a right brain experience rather than a left brain experience when you're in India.
Yeah.
The people are so loving, so friendly, so giving, so warm, affectionate. All the things that really make life worthwhile, they are embodying that. Yeah. So for me, it was a wonderful experience. And when I do recall when I was sitting at the airport waiting to leave India in 1970, right after I had been there for 6 months. I was on the teacher training course for 3 months, and then I stayed for another 3 months with just a handful of people with Maharishi. There was only about 6 of us with Maharishi, and we just hung out for another 3 months. But I recall sitting in the airport waiting for the plane to get on the plane, and there were several German pilots and stewardesses who suddenly appeared because they had gotten off a plane, and there they were. And we were sitting there, and there was such an uptight vibe about those people. It was so foreign to what we had been experiencing for the last 6 months of this experience of people being so open-hearted and loving, that it was such a huge contrast to see these German pilots and stewardesses. That's what really struck me, was how uptight they were, how rigid they were, how there was no love emanating from them. And that was what my experience. And Maharishi himself was an incredibly loving being. You can criticize him all you want about whatever his human failings were, but he just exuded love. He was just a ball of love. And when you were around him, you felt so loved. And he was like the embodiment of a holy person in the sense that he was so loving.
As an aside, one of a type of person I encountered traveling around India, again, by rail at one point for 3 days and 2 nights, as you've seen depicted occasionally, on the roof of a passenger train, because there was no room. And, you did it. And I didn't roll off or die, or I made friends with the people around me. We watched out for each other. At one point, actually having to travel by elephant in Mysore province, not for some touristy reason, but because it was the only way I could get from point A to point B. I met I can't call them a class of people. These were men who overwhelmingly had careers on the Indian Railway, a bureaucracy that is mind-bending and was established in part not necessarily to be the most efficient railway in the world, but to employ the most people. They needed jobs. And after, 25, 30 years on the job, they would retire with their modest pension, and they would spend a year traveling around India, often letting their hair grow long, wearing all the holy marks, sadhus. The tradition of I am a traveler, I am passing through here, people respond, let us take care of you while you are here. Or a dharamsala, a residence that you were invited to stay in for free for 3 days. I encountered that on a trip to Darjeeling, one of my favorite places in the world, and made the really bad social or cultural mistake of, when my time was up, offering to pay to spend a little extra time, and then realized that was an insult to the keeper of the inn, who this was his way of giving back in the world. It's such simple, basic, heartfelt concepts that we don't have in the West. What? You're running this place so I can stay here for free for 3 days so you can have some sense of giving back to the society? Are you insane? That's not the way we think in the West. But chatting with these men who might have looked like they stepped out of, a Tagore tale or something from, just the wildest days of India's glorious past, very well educated, learning more about their country, and meeting people in depth while honoring the deity that they felt closest to by literally being that person in appearance. It was wonderful. And I was accepted as just another traveler on the road with them, which was terribly moving because, again, our Western minds are not trained to think like that. And I'm sure India has changed, of course, in many ways since the half century or so since we first went. But at the same time, there is that innate spirit, probably more alive now in the countryside. And some of the problems of the cities are horrendous, of course, with, pollution and global warming and groundwater problems. I mean, it's terrifying. I think if there were one spiritual message that could go out, it would come under the general title of what I grew up understanding was governed by a phrase called family planning. Let's not have quite so many children. Let's manage our lives in the earth better, but that's not acceptable suggestion. It's the one thing I can do in my life that you can't tax, that you can't control. I can have kids. I can have a large family, and hopefully, like 1,000 years ago, there'll be a few left to take care of me when I'm old. It's another part of the wheel of karma that it spins, but not without its problems. Susan, let's go back to some of your speakers, because again, I'm unfamiliar with quite a number of them, but at the same time, you read their bios and you look at the presentations they're doing, the workshops they're doing, and the leisure time that you can have to get more deeply involved with what they're doing, who they are, the work that they're doing. Right now, I'm curious, Misha Johnson, can you tell us a bit about her and her work?
The great thing about Misha is she's going to be leading the UFO watch nightly, and she has her night vision goggles.
Whoa.
So people will be able to actually view UFOs. Remember earlier you had asked me if I've ever seen a UFO. The only time I've ever seen them was at one of these UFO watches on our cruise ships. Wow. That we do. So she's a fascinating person who does this professionally. She lives in Las Vegas and she leads UFO tours so that people can see them with the night vision goggles. And she says she's a third generation experiencer, having contact with 8 different types of extraterrestrials, including MyLab and MK Ultra, which were 2 periods of 8 months of missing time, including a marriage she has no memory of.
Oh my.
Yeah. So she's a fascinating person, and she's been on several of my cruises. So she's doing a workshop called You Can Handle the Truth. And she's also doing private sessions. Many of our speakers are doing private sessions, including Daryl Sims, by the way.
Yes. I'm looking now at the bio of Dr. Barbara Stone, also incredibly impressive, and with a background in psychology, but coming out of that to do the work that she does. Can you tell us a bit about the presentation she'll be giving?
Well, what I'm most fascinated with is she's going to be doing a workshop called Star Civilizations 101.
Right. Yeah.
And she's going to be talking about various categories of ETs. She's going to talk about reptilians. She's going to talk about the Nordics. She's going to talk about short grays. She's going to talk about Arcturians, Syrians, Pleiadians. I think it's going to be a fascinating presentation. I can't wait to hear what she has to say.
Susan, you're doing a workshop called Contact with Extra Dimensional Beings. It's I'm using extraterrestrial or interdimensional. Can you tell us why that specific term and a bit about what this workshop will be?
Well, the reason I call them extra dimensional beings is to classify them not as physical beings, but as beings that are on another dimension. And those would be divine beings, specific divine beings that we can communicate with, deities, angels, archangels, beings of light. And it's going to be an experiential workshop. So we're going to go into a guided meditation. Remember, I talked about guided meditation earlier. So I'll be guiding the group into meditation and helping them to have direct experience of these extra dimensional beings.
I'm now looking at the bio of, again, my employer on this radio network, Margie Kay, and reminded all of your presenters, their professional backgrounds are almost always fascinating and not what you would expect. Margie is a licensed private investigator, obviously paranormal and UFO investigator, a nationally acclaimed remote viewer. And that is a subject we could spend a great deal of time on. If you're not familiar with the term, remote viewing is something that when I was introduced to it 25, 30 years ago or so, I thought it was a joke. I thought remote viewing, that's, it's got to be some kind of con. Nobody can just close their eyes and tell you what's in an envelope or going on 1,000 miles away or on the surface of the moon, except that it has proved itself reliable time after time after time. I know successful business people who have used it in making important business decisions. Margie is also a musician, a Reiki master, and an author. And her shops, first is The Fast Movers, How to Capture High-Speed UFOs on Camera, Winged Aliens. Angels do have wings, and private readings as well. Is all I can say. Have you spoken with Margie about the workshop she's going to be doing, or have you seen her work before?
Yeah, I'm so fascinated with Margie. I didn't know her until recently, but I think she's an amazing, amazing host, radio host, and she is obviously has a very fascinating background. I love this idea of winged aliens. I mean, she's talking about Mothman sightings. She's talking about fairy sightings, gigantic black birds with huge wingspans, thunderbirds, hawk morphing into saucer-shaped, shiny, metallic UFOs. This sounds fascinating. I can't wait to hear about that. And she actually gave me a long list of topics that she wanted to speak about. She's very, very seasoned professional. She's amazing.
She sure is. I'm so glad to see you included Michael Forrest in your lineup. My interest in ancient civilizations, mysteries of how civilizations way in our past who should logically not have had an opportunity because of time, distance, all kinds of logistics of ever making contact, did just that. And of course, we have a whole area of scholarship around kind of connecting up ancient civilizations with commonalities that we can only be in wonder about. One of Michael's workshops is The Lost Civilizations of Mesoamerica and the Connection to Ancient Egypt. Are you familiar with this part of Michael's work?
Well, I went to Michael's website, aliencarvings.com, and I was so struck. It was just amazing. There's a video on there of digging up all these artifacts that are just so incredible. I mean, he's going to bring these onto the ship. He's going to bring a whole box of them onto the ship, maybe even more than one box. He told me that he lives nearby, so he's just going to drive to Seattle. He lives in Spokane, so he's going to bring a whole bunch of these artifacts onto the ship, which I'm really excited about.
Wow. That's wonderful. I hope none of them will open up a hole in the space-time continuum that affects the voyage. Just a possible little awkward moment there.
Yeah.
Also,
and he's also doing Anunnaki evidence across the globe, the enduring symbology in modern times.
Let's talk a moment about the Anunnaki, because some of our viewers and listeners may not be familiar with that term.
Well, I'm really not that familiar with it myself, frankly.
Well, an ancient a civilization on a planet that's on a very wide loop, but is part of the orbit around our Earth. And according to certain antiquarian scholars, I guess the best known being the late, great Zecharia Sitchin, that they have interacted with us to a tremendous degree, going back to the origins of civilization and actually beyond that. And their impact is deeply felt although many people, of course, have no idea of the influences they've had on our civilization. Crystal skulls and carvings from Alien Carvings collection. This is an area that I found one has to be particularly careful about, because unless you have a scholar, a practitioner, somebody who is able to kind of vet the authenticity of objects, creating, fake votive objects and antiques is as old as, art itself. Ancient Egypt, there is a thriving business in creating facsimiles, and the real ones, though, if you're not like a totally armored person, there can be you can experience things in their presence that will catch you off guard. I guess one of the best knowns are this series of crystal skulls, and by crystal, of course, we mean quartz, which is incredibly hard to work with, especially with ancient tools, and especially brittle, like ancients making flint arrowheads. You can control the material to a great degree, but hit it once at the wrong angle and it will literally shatter. So hands-on with ancient crystal skulls and carvings, all right. That will be something unlike any UFO or paranormal conference I've ever attended.
Yeah, this is very interesting. And he talks about the fluorescent properties, luminescence and phosphorescence emitted by these objects. And he says we're going to experience that firsthand on the ship, because he's bringing them, and he's going to be using a black light to show us their phosphorescence. And wow, I can't wait.
You have Chris Rael, a noeticist, teacher of ether physics and speaker, considers himself a star walker or an Etherian who has had direct contact with his stellar family since he was very young. Chris is going to be doing a workshop called Cosmic Consciousness and ET Influence. Already an intriguing title. Have you seen any of Chris's talks? Or
I have. The reason why I invited him to this cruise is because I saw his video and I was so impressed with what he had to say. He is he's another level, in my opinion. This is somebody who is really on a very profound expanded consciousness, somebody who really understands what oneness means. He really understands what the experience of unbounded awareness is, not just from talking about it, but from direct experience. And so I just thought this person has to be on this cruise. I'm very impressed with him. So I invited him.
Outstanding. Haley Ramsey, multifaceted explorer, writer, and researcher whose passion lies in unraveling the mysteries of ancient civilizations and esoteric traditions, with a focus on old world goddess cults. And I'm just going to stop there for a moment to say, I think one of the great challenges of monotheism is it's about a guy, all powerful and to a degree inflexible, where the goddess tradition, which I won't say it faded out, it was stamped out to a degree, almost transitionally as we were coming into what I'll call the Judeo-Christian era. And Haley is a scholar in not just the goddess tradition, but I love the specificity, the workshop, The Goddess in the Lodge, Unraveling the Sacred Feminine in Freemasonry. Once again, how the feminine in our modern world has been assaulted, for several thousand years. I mean, it's no secret that, men dominate the world in pretty much every area except for having babies. And if they did, I think there'd be a lot of differences in the way they see the world. But Haley's particularly is one that I would like to hear. Again, she's obviously a scholar, but she brings it into the esoteric and the more mystical traditions in a way that looks like it would be a very compelling talk. Holy moly.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Because you don't think of sacred feminine and Freemasonry, you don't think of those two things together.
No.
Because you see Freemasonry as a totally male-dominated,
Right.
patriarchal
Right.
entity. So the goddess in the lodge unveiling the sacred feminine and Freemasonry, that sounds pretty interesting to me.
Amen. Is Haley Scottish?
Well, she might have Scottish heritage, but she's an American. But she does take people on tours to Scotland to go to sacred places. So, in fact, that's where she is right now.
It notes that she spends up to half a year there, which, as somebody who loves Scotland and has visited quite a number of times, talking about the Grail myths, Templar myths, what a perfect pairing. And her book, The Bringer of Life, A Cosmic History of the Divine Feminine. I think that's one I'm going to have to add to my library. Let's see. Frank Huff. Atlantis, again, is one of our most enduring ancient traditions that is consistently challenged by modern history and science, and yet there is too much supporting evidence, even if much of it is anecdotal, that it was there. And what cataclysm, natural or man-made, and I say man-made as opposed to human-made, because if it blowed up, it was guys that did it and not women. The basic rule of history right there, according to Peter Robbins. But once again, lost continent finally found. Another exciting presentation. And he does note Plato wrote about it, and ultimately scholars like Heinrich Schliemann, the German explorer, was able, using nothing but Plato's descriptions, to find artifacts that are so anomalous that they do seem to be only possibly of some, lost civilization like this. Again, Atlantis is kind of in a category of its own. It's not purely the property of the esoteric community. Everybody knows something about it, or that it allegedly existed. Your thoughts on his presentation and learning more about this legendary location?
Well, I've always really been interested in Atlantis, and I've visited Santorini several times, and Akrotiri, which many people believe was Atlantis, because of this huge, they believe that Thera, which now is called Santorini, that caldera there was the event that took place where Atlantis fell into the sea. And obviously, really the only writings we have about it are from Plato, basically. And there are a few others that have written, but based on Plato. And so I'm very interested that he has something else to tell us. He has another theory, and he got it from somebody called Professor Mauricio Nunez de Santos, PhD. So this is his take on Atlantis. I'm not going to say where it is because I don't want to be spoiler, But he has another idea, and he doesn't see it in the Mediterranean. He does not see it in Santorini. But I've taken people to the place, to Santorini, to Thera, and that's where I thought it was, but who knows? We're going to find out what Frank says.
Even though my area of specialty is UFOs, the intelligence is behind them. And again, when I say UFOs, I'm referring to a sliver of that pie chart of all of the things that phenomena may be. In this case, I'm talking about machines of highly advanced technology under intelligent control that come and go from other dimensions or locations in the cosmos at will. At the same time, there are specific areas of study I've either neglected or not gotten very much into, or still have my doubts about, or conflicting information. For me, it'd be a reason I would be very interested in hearing Sheila Nye's talk. Sheila, among other things, is a specialist in a legendary alleged extraterrestrial who came to Earth and interacted with American officials, mostly through the Pentagon, named Val Thor, allegedly from Venus. Have you heard Sheila's presentation or familiar with her argument for the reality of Val Thor?
I've known Sheila for many years. As a matter of fact, she works for me. She's a volunteer staff person on the cruise ship. She's
Great.
going to be helping me, assisting me. I did not know that I do know that she does UFO watch tours in Sedona, where she lives. But I did not know that she does a workshop on Val Thor. But when she told me that she would like to do this, I said, "Oh yeah, we definitely have to have this on the ship," because she has some information about Val Thor. There is information out there about Val Thor, but she has something different. She has different information that people have not heard about.
Huh.
So this is going to be a very unique presentation, and I'm very intrigued by it.
Last year, for the first time, I spoke at a UFO conference that's been going for about 35 years. It's a very well-known one and highly regarded one, the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference, which was started by the late Dolores Cannon, a world-recognized psychic. And I see you have Melanie, and I'm about to butcher her last name here, I hope not, Aguirre?
Melanie Aguirre, yeah.
Okay. Author, researcher, hypnotist, trance channel, and more. She's doing a workshop titled The Armies of Life, Powerful Multidimensional Activations and Galactic Grids. It's terminology I'm simply not familiar with, and wondered if you could give us a basic sketch on what we might expect from Melanie's presentation.
Oh, well, yeah, she calls it the Army of Light, and it's apparently people who are dedicated to facilitating profound multidimensional activations and galactic grid work across the globe. She's not the only one who is doing that type of work. We have another one on the cruise who's doing that as well. Rion Drouin. His name is Rion, French name. So they both are doing these kinds of grid work. It's activating certain lines of energy in the Earth's energy field. So there's many people that are interested in like clearing the energy of the Earth and reactivating the spiritual lines. Some people call them ley lines. Some people call them grids.
Yeah. I
across
see. Okay.
the globe.
Got it.
So So that's what she's going to be talking about, which I think is fascinating. It's fascinating work. And then she's also doing Awakening the Star Seed, Navigating the Journey of Self-Healing Purpose and Light Work. So she talks about the star seed experience of people who really, that their origins are from another planet, that they are beings who have come and incarnated into this physical form on the earth plane, but in fact their galactic heritage is extraterrestrial, and she is one of those people. And she also channels, she does trans channeling, and she channels being from extraterrestrial being. So
I aforementioned earlier on in the show, in the first hour, Geraldine Orzoko, who I had met several years ago at a conference in Nevada, and was very impressed by her presentation. Geraldine is a psychotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, gong instructor, medical panic healer, and intuitive life force cultivation master. Geraldine has over 17 years of experiences in energy cultivation arts, has experienced fully conscious interdimensional contact experiences as well. And she's doing what I think will be a very interesting talk, drawing on the science in a way that accompanies some of this material that most folks are not tuned to looking at in a scientific way. The title of her workshop is Waking Up from the Dream Inside the Dream, Interdimensional DNA Lineages and Ascension. What an intriguing title for a presentation.
it sure is. She's going to do some kind of DNA activation, I believe, in her presentation, but she's also doing private sessions of DNA activations. So she says that DNA reprogramming is a deep healing that focuses on accessing and deprogramming the root cause of trauma, pain, suffering, and blockages. And what she's doing is removing anything that can hinder the embodiment of your highest expression. So she apparently has had quite a background in direct contact with extraterrestrials. So this should be really interesting.
One speaker I would love to hear, and this is much more nuts and bolts, grounded for me in the three-dimensional historic world. Scott Wolter, WOLTER, best known as host of the History Channel show America on Earth. Scott is a scholar in the Templars and Freemasons. He is doing a workshop, and the first two words are kind of a buzz for many people because of the program that became very popular on the History Channel and ultimately very frustrating for many viewers: Oak Island, Knights Templar, and the Holy Grail, Secrets of the Underground Project Revealed. I think that would be wonderful to see. Also, the fact that he is also one of those people looking to uncover truths about historic artifacts and sites throughout North America and beyond. That's a great area of scholarship one could easily spend the rest of your life in, no question. A few years ago, I visited America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire, which is a good example of the kind of sites that Scott looks into, which is completely anomalous. It shouldn't exist there. It's not a native site or an American Indian site. It's Neolithic, and there's nothing like it anywhere aside from it in that area of the United States. Anyway, that's a talk that I would love to hear as well.
I got to tell you, Scott is probably the best speaker on this entire cruise.
Wow.
He is just stunning. He is so fascinating. I mean, he is enthralling. I guarantee that if you listen to him, if you come to his talk, your mind will be blown. He's such an incredible speaker. I have to give what is due to him, and that is accolades. Accolades are due to Scott Walter. He is amazing, and the things that he reveals, the things that he comes up with, oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. He's doing a couple workshops. One is called Oak Island, Knights Templar and the Holy Grail, Secrets of the Underground Project Revealed. And he's doing also the Cremona document and the Book of the Wars of the Lord. The Book of the Wars of the Lord. Wow. Wait till you hear about that and what that is. Oh my gosh. And then Henry Sinclair and the Sinclair Wymus journals. These journals that were concealed in a saddlebag that were unearthed in 2005. And how it details the endeavors of 2 Scottish Templar families across 15 generations.
Wow.
Engaged in a 400-year quest in safeguard the Knights Templar treasure in North America. This is like, Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. I mean, he's like the character from he's like, that's what Scott is like. He is so interesting.
Wow. A related speaker in terms of subject is Mas Atai. And his workshop is explaining the mysteries of ancient civilizations, why humans are more advanced than aliens, and how to activate your exponential intelligence. I'm thrilled to know I'm more smarter than an alien, although a little reticent to try it out.
Yeah. This is, he is really an incredible healer, Mas. And he is, he has kind of a otherworldly perception. His perception is really quite astounding. I sat down with him on a recent cruise that I did. I had organized a cruise just for him and his followers. We went to Tahiti. Wow. And we were there in January. And he offered to give me a session, just a free session, and I sat down with him. And he just read me the entire, he had everything. He knew everything about my life. It was unbelievable.
We could go on for show after show. The fact is, you and I have run out of time. Susan,
okay.
A missing time experience. I want to remind our viewers and listeners that you can visit the website for the cruise at divinetravels.com. That's
There's a better website for the cruise. Contact@Sea Cruise.
There we go.
It's called the Contact@Sea Cruise. And that is contact@sea.com. That's contact, CONCH, CONTACT @ATCSEA. Contact@sea.com.
And to learn more about you and your work, DrSusan.org.
DrSusan.org, yeah.
Dr. Susan Shumsky, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I only wish I could be along on that cruise. I am jealous as hell. And just been delightful speaking to you. I'll help to keep promoting the cruise. And what can I say? Anybody that's listening, if you are able and you have the means, please consider this very special event. It might be life-changing for you. Otherwise, Peter Robbins here. Meanwhile, Here on Earth is the show. Stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and we'll see you next week.